131. Many days and nights. The days went the same for a long time, Umar. The days went the same for a long time, Umar. The camels in our barn were very well behaved. We never hit them, and I always talked to them. I encouraged the boys to talk to them too. Zaid figured out I had an affinity with the camels, so he put camels they had problems with in our barn. I did not mind. Camels are like any living creature. They need food, water, rest, and affection. I did the best I could. It grew hotter. It soon became clear that you were not here and you were not coming here. Why endure this misery if I was not helping you? I watched everything that went on in the camp so that I could discover safe passage to another camp. The camels in our barn were all going to race this year. In other barns, boys trained younger camels to get used to the saddle and to jockey. A man in white, a Badu, is often there to tell Zaid what to do. He was either the owner or the trainer. After a while, Zaid started to put Talat and Malik on the camels. On his first time up, Talat looked over at me, his eyes filling with tears, and I stared back at him, trying to encourage him without saying a word. Oh, Umar, it about broke my heart to see these children treated so inhumanely day after day. My goal was to save you. After that, I needed to save them. Talat and Malik were tied to the saddle at first. They also held onto the strap around the hump. Zaid walked the camels for a while, and then he had them go faster so the boys could get used to the camel's gait, or so the camel could get used to the boy. A gait is like the way a camel walks or runs. At the end of that first day of riding, Talat and Malik returned to the shack, crying and holding on to their testicles. They were so sore, and I had nothing to help them. Nothing cold, no ointment. Yusuf had gotten good at finding things for us, with the help of Shadow Boy, I suspected. So I asked him to try and find some extra cloth or clothes and a needle and thread. I took turns rocking the two little boys on my lap until it was time for a story. Then they lay in the shack, curled up next to each other while I continued the tale of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves. To my surprise, Yusuf was able to procure the needed items within a day in exchange for a few dates. Why don't they just steal dates from their own barns, I asked. Because they believe they're poisoned, Yusuf said. They also believe that you have a gift of removing the poison, so they know your dates are safe. A boy was caught with his hand in the dates once, and Zaid made him eat one, and the boy fell ill within minutes. They think you're a sorcerer, or a genie, the boy with the enchanted scar. I spent that night, after the story, making pouches for the boys that would cover their testicles. I stuffed sand inside these pouches, and then sewed them up again. The next day, the three boys, Sulman was riding now too, wore the patches and came back feeling much less bruised. I made two more, one for me and one for Yusuf. Within a few days, word had gotten around to camp about the pouches. All the riders wanted one, even though most of them were barely old enough to say out loud what they wanted. We had plenty of sand, that would not be a problem, but Shadow Boy and Yusuf had to work hard to find enough thread, needles, and cloth. I couldn't do it alone, of course, so I taught many of the boys how to sew. The younger boys could not get their fingers to thread the needle and make the loops through the cloth, but the older boys could do it and did. At night, we set up several barrels of light during stories. While I told tales, many of the boys sewed pouches. It was quite a sight, Umar, me talking while these boys sewed. In those moments, as Shadow Boy and Yusuf passed around watered-down tea and the boys sewed and listened, we could pretend all was normal, or at least a kind of normal we had decided to create for ourselves. Yet, I was not getting any closer to you, Umar. Often, I sat out under a night sky filled with stars, wondering where you were. For several nights in a row, I saw many falling stars. I called the boys out of their shelters to watch with me. I told them Baba's story of the fallen star children. So many stars are falling tonight, Talat said. Do you think they will all find their families again? I hope so, I said. They look like they're falling to the desert, Sulman said. Do you think Zaid will make them ride camels? Maybe we should go find them first, Talat said. I bet they'd be easy to spot in the desert at night if they're still shiny and bright. Sulman and Talat stood alongside several other boys ready to begin the rescue. That's nice of you to want to save any lost children, I said, but you need to keep yourselves safe. It's just a story, Yusuf said. There are no lost children in the desert. No? Shadow Boy said. Then what are we? I knew if I wanted to find you, I had to escape. Then I would come back for the other boys. I figured out I could hide in one of the trucks that came and went through the day and see where it would take me. On the day I decided to do just that, Zaid Zayd called us all together. He said Nasir, the older Nasir, since there were several Nasirs, had run away by hiding in the back of a pickup truck. Where was he going in this desert? Zayd said. To visit scorpions? To have dinner with the vultures? No, wait, he was the dinner for the vultures. My men found him still in the truck, dead, while the vultures ate out his eyeballs. This was all that was left of him. He dropped a dirty white tunic on the sand. A black stain curved around one fold. Any of you want to join him? Go on! Your families do not want you. This land is not your land, and so they do not want you unless you care for their precious camels, their ships in the desert. You decide. He walked away. The boys circled the clothes. Yusuf went closer and crouched down next to the tunic. Looks like blood, he said. Slowly the boys walked away. Yusuf and I walked back to our shelter together. Do you think we will ever leave this place, he asked. Yes, I'm sure of it, I said. Alive? Of course, I said, although I was not certain. That night I realized the only way I could get to you was by being able to attend to the races, where all the other camel kids would be. I had to figure out a way to convince Zayd to let me become a jockey. Not that I wasn't terrified of that idea, Umar. Every day a child fell off and got hurt. Talat fell off a couple of times but was somehow unharmed. He curled into a ball before he hit the ground and he broke nothing. I don't know why. As the boys got more experience, they fell off less, until the trainer decided to speed the camels up, then the falls increased again. A boy fell off not too long ago, and the camels trampled him. It was so horrible I can hardly bear to think of it. I did not see him fall, but I saw the men run to pick him up. He bounced around in their arms like a doll, his body limp and ragged. I don't know where they took him, but we all know he was dead. That night, after my story, each boy said his name out loud. Then we were silent for a long while, sitting together until one by one the boys left the circle. The best way for me to become a jockey was to figure out how I could get a camel to run faster when I was on it. As I said, the camels already liked me. I had learned right away that camels were intelligent. They rewarded those who treated them well and punished those who did not. Several of the boys regularly scavenged from the men's area, so I asked them to bring back anything that boy or camel would eat. Each camel had its own likes and dislikes, and I encouraged the boys to try and find out what their camels most liked. It was obvious the trainers and owners, whoever they were, prized their camels and thought little of us, so if the camels were attached to us, perhaps we would have an easier time of it. At least this is what I believed. In our barn, the queen of camels was Jaja. She had once been the hope of her owner, Zayd said. A few months ago, she hurt her leg. The leg got better, but she didn't want to race anymore. Lately, she had started trying to bite her jockeys during the practice races. Zayd cursed her, hit her, threatened her. She tried to bite him. When that didn't work, she threw up on him. When she was not racing, Jaja was gentle as a well-fed kitten. She followed me around and nibbled on my pockets, looking for treats. Once I figured out that Jaja liked orange and lemon rinds, I whispered rinds every time I fed her. Soon I had only to say the word and she would trot over to me from across the barn, or I would stand next to her and whisper rinds, trough, and she would lope over to the trough. When I went to get her from the track, I practiced saying rinds and trough to see if that made her hurry back to the barn, and it did. One day, while I was brushing her, she turned her head as if to bite me, but I gave her a rind from my pocket, and she turned back to the trough. I gently moved the hair away from the spot where I had just brushed near her hump, and I found a bump with pus coming out of it. It was highly calloused, so it must have been there for a while, and it was where the strap went around the hump. I ran to Zayd to tell him. He hurried to the barn to examine Jaja. The next day, a man and a woman came to the barn to care for Jaja. The woman was white and wore the clothes of a Westerner, or an American. She stood on a stool to look at the sore. Keep her head still, the woman yelled in English. As the woman poked and prodded her back, Jaja shook away the boys at her head. Finally, I went over to Jaja, put several rinds and a date in my palm, and I held it out to her. She ate it all, looking at me while the woman leaned over her hump. Good girl, the woman said as she got down. For a moment of terror, I thought she was speaking to me. Had she discovered my secret? Then I realized she was talking to the camel. She'll be fine, the woman said. Put this ointment on it 3 times a day. Why don't you let him, the boy with the scar, what's your name? She was looking at me. Akbar, I said. Let Akbar do it, she said. She seems to trust him. Don't put a saddle on her until it clears up. She dropped a small jar into Zayd's hand and then left with the other man. It was the first time I had seen a woman in weeks, months. I ran after her as she walked to her truck. Have you seen my brother Umar? I asked her in English. She stopped and looked at me. Your brother Umar? Where would I have seen him? In one of the camel camps. He's about 6 years old. She laughed. Honey, I've seen dozens of boys who fit that description. She opened the door to the pickup and got in. She waved at me and then drove away. And they drove away. Zsa's sore got better, but she still did not like being ridden. Let me try, I said to Zaid. I bet I can get her to go farther than any of the other jockeys. Which would not be such a feat since the stupid animal will only run a short distance, he said. Zaid finally agreed to let me ride Zsa. She seemed so tall, and I felt so tiny once I was on her hard, bony back. I was glad I had put on the sand pouch in anticipation of this moment. Zsa and I walked around for a while. She did not try to bite me. She started trotting. Ouch! That was not pleasant. I whispered, rhyme, trough, and she began running around the track. I held on very tightly. I thought for certain I would fall off. She passed by camel after camel while I rocked from side to side. Soon we were back at the starting point. Zsa knelt down and I slid off her back and quickly fed her an orange rind. You were only supposed to walk her, Zaid said, slapping me across the back of my head. Ouch, I said, rubbing my head. He did not hit me very hard, however, so I knew he was pleased. After that, I rode Zsa nearly every day. Yosef was riding now, too. The trainers from other camps brought their camels and boys to our camp for practice races. I looked for you in the groups of new boys, but you were not there. I asked the boys if any of them knew a boy named Umar, and no one did. I rode Zsa during the practice races. We lined up at the starting line. Someone shot off a gun, and we all lurched forward. It seemed so crowded with all the other camels and boys, and I was sure Zsa felt the same way, because she didn't even need to hear rind. She hurried to the head of the pack and beyond. I felt as though I were flying, Umar. I was terrified I would fall off, but Zsa responded to my voice and the pressure from my foot. I didn't need to use the whip, which meant I had one more hand to use to cling onto the strap. Trucks drove around the outside of the track with men leaning out of them, shouting at their jockeys and camels. Zsa and I ignored them all, and for a moment I imagined I was a Bedouin traveling the deserts looking for adventurers. Soon it was time for the camel races outside the city, wherever the city was. That was where I would go and find you, Umar, I was certain. Not all of us could go. Some of the boys had to stay behind with the camels in training, including Shadow Boy. On the night before we were to leave, the boys and I gathered together for one last night of stories. Will you tell us what happened to Shahrazad? Shadow Boy asked. But you know what happened to her, I said. All right, let us talk of Shahrazad, because his first wife had betrayed him. The king took a new wife for only a night, every night. At the end of the night, he would have someone kill the wife. Then he would pick another woman to be his bride. The entire kingdom lived in fear. Soon they would have no women left. Shahrazad stepped forward and asked her father to arrange for the king to make her his next bride. Her father begged her to reconsider, but she knew what she was doing. The king and Shahrazad got married and spent the night together. Afterwards, she asked if she could tell a story to her sister before she met her fate. He agreed. She told the story and started another one. The king wanted to hear the end of the story, so he agreed to keep her another night, as she told another story and another, until 1001 nights had passed and she had told story after story and birthed 3 babies. Have you told 1001 stories? One of the boys asked. No, nor have I birthed 3 babies, the boys laughed. So what happened? One night Shahrazad said, I have now told you tales for 1000 nights and one night. May I ask you a favor? The king said, ask it. Bring me my children, she said, and her 3 boy children were brought to her. King, these are your children, as they are mine. Will you spare my life so that they may not be motherless? The king said, I pardoned you before these children were ever born, because I knew you to be a good woman. Soon the entire kingdom was celebrating the news. The king sent for his chroniclers, and they wrote down all of the stories his wife had told, and they named the compilation The Stories of 1000 Nights and a Night. Praise be to Allah, and that is all. The boys were silent. I wished then I could let them know that I was a woman. I wished I was dressed in something beautiful and colorful, that I could embrace each and every one of them and promise that their lives would be better, but I could not reveal myself or promise them. Remember, I said, the nights are yours. The boys walked up to me one at a time, put their hands together at their hearts, and filed by. Shadow Boy was the last to leave. I stood and looked into his eyes. He was no longer Shadow Boy. Ibrahim, I said, it is now up to you. You will be back, he said. That is not my wish, I said. Then it shall not be my wish, he said. May Abu Hassan never come your way. Nor yours, I said, and we shook hands. Then he walked away. The morning was very difficult. Suleiman and Malik were staying behind too. Zaid had wanted Malik to go in Yusuf's stead, but I begged him not to separate the brothers. I promised if Jaja did not win every race he entered us in, Zaid could beat me senseless. But please let Suleiman and Malik stay together. He grew weary of my entreaties and relented, but now we had to say goodbye to the brothers. I had no words. I hugged them tightly and gave them my needles and thread to hold on to. I hoped I would be back for the boys, but I could not promise. The men loaded the camels onto the trailers. The boys and I, along with the men, got into the back of several pickups. If we had been alone, I would have told a story, but when the men were around, we pretended we were all stupid boys so they would ignore us. We reached our new home just before sunset. We had little time to get the camels unloaded and into the open barns before it was dark. We had to sleep out on the sand until dawn. As the sun came up, I saw tents that would be home for a time. I was glad that our boys would all be together. We would not have to fight off other boys like we had to at the beginning. I could see other camel camps and barns in the near distance. Farther away was the racetrack. It was several days before I had a chance to look for you, Umar. Yusuf and I ran from camp to camp, which was no easy task given the distance and the chance we would get caught. We did not find you. We could not go to every camp, and I hoped I would see you at the races themselves. We trained every morning from dawn to night, taking a break only when it was too hot. 2 days before opening day, Zaid had us put something over each camel's mouth to prevent it from eating. I had to keep Jaja very still and calm. On opening day, we went to the racetrack. So many people. Men with clipboards walked around talking to the trainers and owners. I looked for you every chance I got. Near to the tracks, a huge white tent stood over a bright green lawn with palm trees and shrubs growing around it. Colorfully clothed women stood together inside the tent on one side, men on the other. Behind the tent, I saw several shops, a mosque, maybe a police station. Yosef ran over to me. "Have you seen Talat?" he asked. "No," I said. "He went with his camel earlier. Why?" He seemed too scared. Yosef said, This is his first real race." "How he did all right in the practice races," I said. I glanced at Yosef as he looked around at the camels, men and boys. I wondered if he was frightened too. "I thought my father might have come," Yosef said. "Maybe he is here, but he hasn't found you yet," I said. "If he is, will you ask him to take you home?" "Yes," he said. "I will have him take all three of us home." When it was time, the boys and camels in my race lined up at the start. Trucks, cars, buses, and vans with television cameras idled on the other side of the fence, waiting for us to begin. Zaid had put something in my ear that allowed me to hear what the driver of the truck told me to do. Use the whip, use my heel, slow down, speed up. But Jaja and I had raced before, and I knew she would run faster than the rest just to get away from everything and everyone. I heard the gun go off. Jaja jumped forward. We stayed with the other camels and riders, and as we raced past the tent and into the desert. The racetrack went for 4 kilometers and then curved back 4 more kilometers. Jaja eventually took the lead, and we were all alone for another kilometer. Suddenly, the rocking motion became jerky. Jaja was limping. I pulled her to the side of the racetrack. She slowly sank to the sand, and I slipped off. Zaid got out of the truck, cursing as he hurried toward Jaja. "She hurt her leg," I said. He pushed me out of the way as the other camels ran by us. The other 2 men got out of the truck. They poked and prodded Jaja. She hollered for me, and I went to her and fed her orange rinds. A camel van drove onto the track, and Jaja stood, and one of the men led her up the ramp and into the vehicle. "You go," Zaid said. I jumped onto the truck with Jaja and held onto her rope as the truck slowly drove away. Sometime later we stopped. The Western woman from the desert came to the van and told the men how to get Jaja into the building without hurting her. I stayed nearby and stroked her face as we went inside what looked like a brand new hospital. Umar, you won't believe this. It was a hospital for camels. They took Jaja to a room that was nicer than anything I'd ever seen. The Western woman did something to Jaja so that she fell asleep. I was allowed to leave then, while the woman Zaid and a man in white talked about Jaja. I waited in a room nearby that had magazines, a television, and snacks. Since no one was around, I quickly ate some breads, a banana, and an orange. I stuffed a few pieces of the sweets and 2 fruits in my pocket for Talat and Yosef. I flipped through the magazines, but I could not read the script. Then I lay on the couch and fell asleep. "Well, if it isn't Scarface," I heard someone say. I opened my eyes and quickly sat up. The Western woman next to a beautiful woman dressed in shimmering gold. I had to blink and wipe my eyes to see if I was dreaming. "Scarface," the Western woman said in English. "This is the Sheikah. Her husband owns all that you see, including you, including you and the camels. The Sheikah looked over at the woman, and the woman purposefully closed her mouth and circled her thumb and finger around her lips. How are you, young man? The Sheikah said in English. What is your name? I am Ali Akbar, I said, standing. I am honored to meet you. Your English is very good, the Sheikah said. You are Jaja's jockey? You did very well. Someone else might have beaten her to keep her going until she crossed the finish line. As it is, she will be able to race again in 2 weeks' time. That is good to hear, I said. You will ride Jaja in the Sheikah's race then? The Sheikah said. For the winning jockey, I grant any wish, just like a genie. She laughed, and her laugh sounded like water over stones, soothing and joyful. I was tempted to get on my knees then and there and confess all to her and ask her for help in getting you back, but then I remembered her husband owned our camels and the tiny camel kids. It would be good for someone like you to win, the Sheikah said. It would put to rest all those rumors about us using underage children as jockeys. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks if you are the winner. Last year, the young boy asked for ice cream. I hope you will ask for something more interesting. If I'm the winner, I said, I promise to ask for something interesting. The Sheikah and the Western woman left. Zaid stepped out of the shadows and slapped me on the back of the head. So the Sheikah has a favorite, does she? Zaid said. You best not disappoint her. I returned to camp by nightfall. Talat and Yosef were asleep in our tent, but awakened when I came inside. I gave them the treats I had saved. I'm so sore, Yusuf said. Me too, Talat said. Some of the other kids whipped me. No, when? Why? I asked. When we were racing, Talat said. They wanted me to fall off the camel. Yosef nodded. You're lucky you were on a winner. Not quite, I said. They weren't our boys whipping you, were they? No, from other camps, Yosef said. I found out that in 2 weeks there's a Sheikah's race. The winning jockey can ask for anything he wants. If I win, I will ask the Sheikah to find my brother. If I win, I will ask the Sheikah to find your brother, Talat said. If I win, I will ask the Sheikah to find your brother. Oh, I said, you are so kind. You are my brothers, too. I would never leave this place without you. We were silent in the darkness. Then Yusuf cleared his throat. Ali Akbar, he said. Talat, Sulman, and Malik asked me to speak with you about this before we left, but it is only now that I'm able to do it. What is it? I asked. Yusuf cleared his throat. Talat leaned closer to me and whispered, We know you're a girl. I was stunned, Umar. I did not know what to say. How? I asked. Well, your chest when you raise. Oh no, I said. What if someone else has seen? If someone else had seen, you'd probably not be here, Yusuf said. We already suspected since you bleed like my sister bleeds. I told you it was from riding camels, I said. But it happened before you rode the camels, Yusuf said. You have to find a way to leave here before they catch you. We would not be able to protect you. I know, I said, but I have to find my brother. You will do your brother no good if you are dead, Yusuf said. All right, I said. I will stay until the Sheikah's race. If I don't find my brother by then, I will figure out a way to leave. I knew you were a girl because you hugged me like my mother used to, Talat whispered. The way she will again, I said.